All right, everyone. Welcome to the Deliberate Way. Great to have you all here. Thanks for holding on because we're here and we've arrived. I'm Dan Sewall, the host of the Deliberate Way, and thanks for joining for our third episode. It's great to have you guys here live and on with us today. So it is holiday season, ladies and gentlemen, and during the holiday season, there is no better gift that you can give than the gift of knowledge. And we've got two awesome people that are going to be with us today for our third episode. Janet Jetto and Cal Austin, thanks for both being here. They're here with me live, and we're going to be talking to them and hearing a lot of interesting stories, tidbits, tips, and some of the hidden secrets that they've been storing away in their gunny sack of innovation facilitation expertise. So thanks for being here, guys.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, for the folks who aren't familiar with the Deliberate Way, and maybe you missed the first two episodes, but you can rewatch those on our YouTube channel. A little bit of a promotional plug there. Long ago, when I was a college athlete and a wrestling coach, I noticed something kind of unique about the really successful athletes and the kids that I worked with. They had a systematic or a very intentional way about doing things, almost what do you call a deliberate approach. And fast forward about 20 years, give or take, and I started to notice inventors, marketers, entrepreneurs, artists, musicians, you name it, the most successful people have this really deliberate or systematic way of doing things. And we've got two of those people here today, Cal and Janet, and we're going to talk more about your craft, the craft of facilitation, because there are deliberate and systematic ways of being an awesome facilitator. A lot of people assume it's just God-given, just divine intervention, and boom, you have it. But like every other craft and avocation, it takes time and it takes deliberate practice. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those skills and techniques here today. So for those who don't know our guests, let me give you a quick readout of who they are. So Janet, you're the founder of the Jetto Group. And for the past couple of decades, you've taught applied creative problem solving. You're a masterful facilitator that's worked with dozens and dozens of organizations, large and small, academic, corporations, you name it, across the spectrum. And Janet is a facilitator, an organizational developer, a trainer, a coach for executives, teams, and project leads alike. And, you know, if you're looking for Janet, you might find her in the city of Steel in Pittsburgh, PA, where hopefully it's not as freezing there as it is here, but I gotta believe it is. Yeah, it's gotta be. But when she's not facilitating, Janet, the rumor is that you're out hiking, biking, boating, skiing, hopefully not all at the same time, but you're an outdoors person. So awesome to have you, Janet.
Thank you, Dan.
Cal, now, not to leave Cal, Cal's a superstar, I'm telling you. But instead of working on the outside, Cal has spent his career working on the inside of one of the largest companies in the world. Full disclosure, Cal and I have known each other for quite a bit of time when we spent time together at Pfizer, where he's been there for over 30 years. Sorry, cat's out of the bag, Cal. 30 years, 30 years. In that time, I'm told he's done it all. Sales operations, training, global marketing, innovation coaching. I mean, you name it, he's done. Have you been the CEO yet, by the way?
Not quite yet.
Not yet.
That's all what right. I'm hanging around for.
All right. I'm voting for you. Next board meeting, I'm coming. When Cal is not doing every job that's been known at Pfizer, he's running workshops and training. He's trained in design thinking, CPS, Agile, Gallup Strength Finders, you name it. He's doing it. And when he's not out facilitating, rumor has it, you're doing beekeeping. You got some beekeeping going on there, Cal?
I have some bees, yeah.
You do. That's an unusual avocation.
It's a very unusual habit. I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that really is. And I hear you also built an ice skating rink in your backyard. I don't want everyone to bum rush your property upstate New York, but that's an amazing thing. It takes a lot of facilitation skills to do that.
Yeah, I don't know about the facilitation skills, but it takes some determination, some deliberate determination.
All right. Well, I love that. Folks, here's the deal. We're going to have 3 rounds with Cal and Janet. Round 1, just a little bit to hear about their perspectives about facilitation, their life and world philosophy. Then we're going to call a pause. It's your chance to have your say. So in that, what we're going to invite you to do, put your questions, comments in LinkedIn Live. Send them over. Our moderator over on LinkedIn Live is going to grab them. She'll send them over here and we'll answer or ask a number of your questions. So happy to field those. So you have a thought, put it out there. Have a spark, share it. There'll be a time for that. Our 3rd round, you're going to love it. You know, I'm a big fan of games. And, you know, one of the great things about games is creating a little bit of energy and momentum behind those games. And the game we're going to play is called Facilitator Dilemmas. Now, it happens from time to time as a facilitator, the unexpected happens. I'm going to lay on Cal and Janet an unexpected scenario, and they're going to have 30 seconds or less. This has not been rehearsed. They don't know what's coming. I'm going to lay that scenario on them, and they have to tell me what they would do. So from my lips to their ears and to your viewing and listening. So that's the plan. Oh, then we'll have a few little more wrap up things at the end, some gifts for you, imparting wisdom. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. First question I have is for Janet. So Janet, you've made a career out of this. You are a masterful facilitator. I can say, because I've been in sessions with you, we've worked together. There aren't many people that really have this craft down like you do. How did you end up doing this? It's not like you studied facilitation in college. And my daughter, who's a freshman in college now in the business school, said there's no classes around facilitation or innovation facilitation for that matter. How did you get involved in this?
But yes, that is true. And I definitely didn't study this, and was also similar to Cal inside of an organization at the time. So I was actually in the business of salty snacks. I was working at a Frito-Lay organization, and not to date myself, but inflation was also had spiked up quite a bit, and it was eating into our profit margins. We had 2 choices. We had to find ways to increase revenue or reduce cost, and I happened to be in the manufacturing side, so we focused on reducing cost, and we did it. We decided we wanted everybody focused on it. Everyone from the shippers, the packers, the people that were actually on the lines making the salty snacks, but that we had to find a way to do that. And so we embarked on this journey of including every person, and how do we get them to think through what are all the challenges they could solve to reduce costs, finding innovative solutions and finding ways to implement them. And so there was a group of us that became what we called facilitators in creative problem solving, and we were just doing it. You know, that wasn't my job. I had another job inside of the organization, but this was sort of the add-on. It was the how we operated, and from there it just, I guess, became a career. So when I left Frito-Lay, they asked me to stay on in that role of a facilitator. And I did so, and then just continued on. So it's been a great journey. I'm blessed to have been on this journey, and it's nice to see that it's not such a strange thing anymore.
Yeah, very, very serendipitous. And do they still have kind of a facilitation capability there, or did it disappear?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dan. Having not been in the organization, I know that I've actually done some projects for PepsiCo, which was the parent company of Frito-Lay over the years. And so I think there's been a lot of, there's still good thinking going on, whether it is as deliberate, as you say, or organized. I don't know, actually. So many of us have moved on in our careers in that.
So just one more follow-up for you, John, on this. Something I hear a lot is, can you really facilitate innovation? It's something that kind of strikes like lightning in a bottle. And I know how I feel about this, but your thoughts, because I'm sure people must say to you like, well, can you really make this a facilitated exercise? Doesn't innovation just have to happen with a few gifted people?
Yeah, that is sort of the old model. And that everybody thought, oh, there's a small group of creatives over there, and we'll just throw stuff on that side of the wall. And what we found is that absolutely you can navigate, you can help people think well together and innovate well together by being very purposeful in making sure that they're doing good challenge formulation, again, solution formulation, not just the first 3 or 4 ideas that come to mind, but giving people the right tools and the right thinking skills to generate expansively. And so absolutely. And even in Frito-Lay, in that story that I told you, we were able to succeed in hitting our goal even faster than we anticipated because of getting people to use their God-given talents, and that we've sort of buried away in our schooling. So absolutely, you can innovate, you can learn to innovate, you can learn this craft 100%.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Cal. You've been inside of Pfizer for many years, and Pfizer has gone through, like most companies, sort of cycles of supporting innovation as a capability centrally, then decentralizing, then disappearing, then coming back. How did you get involved in this, Cal? I mean, you've been doing this for a while, and you do a lot of sessions inside the company. Maybe share a little bit of context about you and how you got involved on this.
Yeah, I guess, one of my roles was in training, and, I really enjoyed that imparting of knowledge, but, it's limited because you're training something that the colleagues can then go and replicate. So the training is really only as good as that bit of information that you're trying to share. It doesn't get expansive from there. It's very rigid structure. Here's how you do it. Now you try it. You practiced it. Now you go off and do it on your own. But I went to a training conference. It's probably close to 15 years ago at this point, and there was a session around open space technology and a way of creative problem solving, and it was a half a day, no agenda, a group of people trying to solve an overarching challenge. And it was one of those unconference self-organizing sessions. And the lead facilitator said, you are not going to leave this afternoon without discussing what's important to you, because you have as much opportunity to put it on the agenda as the next person. And it was so eye-opening. I was so energized. Now, it is as free form as it gets, and it's a tough role for a facilitator to do an unconference because it looks like it's just wide open, but there's some method to the madness. But it really opened my eyes to the world beyond just the rigid training to, what if you just get the smart people in the room to create the content that could then almost be trained or adopted or executed. And I just became so energized with the idea of this that, I stalked people at Pfizer that were doing creative, innovative things until I wound up in a role in that space. And I've really been doing it ever since, innovation, customer experience work.
I mean, I have to tell you, you make me a little nervous when you say, imagine a session without an agenda. And immediately I'm like, oh my God, how could you not have an agenda? But you're saying something a little different. You're saying that sort of on the surface, it may look free form, but underneath there's an order to the chaos. Or am I overreaching?
No, you've got it. I mean, when you get into some of the unconference methodologies, that's one end of the spectrum. Your training's all the way at the other. I like finding that space in between where you've got enough order. You've got the processes, as Janet mentioned. You've got the mindset. You've got the tools, but there's enough space for the smart people in the room to really diverge on the topic that they're working on. I don't want to limit them so much that it's all about following an agenda. They need that creative spark time to really get this done.
Well, let me flip this over to Janet for a minute. Janet, when you think about sort of like your Bible, if you will, of the things that you tell people when they're in a session, thou shalt do these things. What are some of the things you tell people? If you want to be successful, whether you're a participant or you're the one facilitating, what are some of the things that would be on the the 10 commandments of the facilitator. Doesn't have to be 10, by the way, but you know, what might be inscripted on that tablature?
Yeah, well, the absolute foundational work that we do, and whether I'm a facilitator or a participant or the problem owner, I make sure that we understand the difference between generative thinking, or as Cal said, divergence, and the ability to really be expansive in our thinking, and also convergent thinking or evaluative thinking, the ability to make good decisions and evaluate and select out of many options, but most importantly, to defer your judgment and separate those two things. So that is our go-to, as you would call it, principles of how we operate. So we're always orchestrating a team between those two things, and we're not mixing them up. So as a facilitator, it is my role to make sure that we are giving space for both that's appropriate, and that we're doing great divergent thinking, and we're doing also really good impactful convergent thinking, evaluative thinking. So I always say trust the process, that we're going to do both, and that I often, in my role, will navigate through 3 phases of work. It's either what are all the challenges, and let's make sure we're working on the best thing to work on. What are all those solutions, and make sure we're getting some innovation in there, some new thinking, and then how do we take those solutions and make a go of it? So in the end, you have all 3 phases that are well done, and that we're not skipping around. But most importantly, it's being able to be really skillful in generative thinking, so you get some innovation and new thinking in there, and evaluative thinking or convergent thinking.
Cal,
Keep those two things separate, though.
Thanks, Janet. Cal, your things you might have in your Bible that build on or are different than what Janet shared.
And well, let's take the different stakeholders. So
Yeah.
a lot of work happens before you get in the room for the session. So one key is to make sure that you and the sponsor of the challenge, or the challenge owner, are 100% aligned on what the challenge is and what he or she hopes to get out of the day. You want to make sure you're aligned before you enter that room. Now, for the participants of the session that you're facilitating, there's a word I often use is permission. They've got permission to say things that might sound stupid on the surface, or they're very divergent, and that there's a psychological safety that goes along with that they can get in, they can mix it up, they can be playful, they can be silly, they could go out on a limb, but it'll all come together. And for me as the facilitator, Janet used the term right before we went live, read the room. My role is to read the room, because I've got an idea of blocks of time, but the last thing I want to do is, right on the cusp of inspiration, say, well, we've got to move on, because it's you got to read the room. Some things go longer, some things don't need as much time, but you can't demand when that spark of inspiration is going to hit.
I mean, we can't put on the agenda 12:06 inspiration.
That's right.
I don't know why we can't do that. Yeah, that's a great point. I'll something you just said, I'll just kind of pull this out. Something I've observed both of you do that I think's remarkable to tell other people about is when you're doing live sessions, I've noticed that you don't sit there behind the scenes, kind of putting on your makeup and waiting for the show to begin. You're immediately connecting and engaging with the group. And I found it sounds obvious, but it isn't for a lot of people. They have their agenda. They've got to follow it bit by bit. You're out there chatting, socializing, reading the room, so you know what to change in that moment. And it seems like just socializing, but it's a whole lot more than that. Your thoughts, I'll just throw it as a toss up for you or Janet about that, reading the room and that sort of informal piece that you inherently do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a first shot at that.
Yeah,
And
please.
always remember, no matter what you're doing, that you always want to think about the humans involved. There are people that are in that room. There are people that are trying to, figure out what it is they're hurting. They have a problem as a result, or something's happening. That's why you're all in the room. So you definitely want to just center yourself on those folks that are there. And I always say it's easy to show up at a meeting, but we're always asking people to show up and choose to be present. That's really important. And it's important that we do that as well, that we are present with every person in that room. And that's a thing that we ask everyone when they come in the room. It's good to show up. Thank you for showing up. And now we're going to ask that you choose to be present with one another. That's really important.
I feel you on that. It feels very existential. I love it. And it's true. You're right. You could be here, but not really be here. And everybody knows that. The person who takes out their phone, they're like, yep, I'm here. I'll just be with you in 5 minutes. It really does make a difference. And I'm going to flip something over to Cal, just building on this a bit. There's a quote that I like. It was Douglas MacArthur, the famous general, who said something to the effect of that, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. When you think about the planning part, when you're running a workshop or you're planning any type of facilitative event, how much goes into the planning? What type of shorthand do you use, and how do you prepare?
This kills me, because I always like it to look like it's just flowing and it's coming so natural, and but I really, kind of a rule of thumb is, for every hour that I'm in front of a group, I've spent at least 2 hours prepping. And I'm sorry, I have to admit this, but I put together a spreadsheet that does have an agenda and does have timings of what do I want to accomplish, what tools do I need to do this, what's the objective of this portion. And it is down to the 5-minute increments.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never let anyone see it. I certainly don't share the detailed agenda with the stakeholders, and certainly not the participants, because again, I like it to look like things are flowing. And once groups start working on their project, I'll glance at it, make edits. But the plan has got to be there. I love your quote, because I don't think I've ever run a session that stayed to the minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been wildly off in some cases, but the key column is that objective. What are we trying to accomplish here? And as long as I can figure out a way to stay true to the objective, I really don't care so much about did I stick to the minute.
Yeah, very helpful. Janet, how do you have different intentions? Do you handle it differently than Cal?
No, I handle it almost identically, in that we always have on the agenda not only what are the things that we want to do there, but what's the intent or the objective, and even to the point of what material do I need at that moment in time. What is it that I need at my disposal right there?
Mm-hmm.
So I can, and even, so oftentimes people are building agendas, they forget the transition times. So if you're moving groups in and out, and small groups and large groups, it takes time. And unless you're accounting for that, pretty soon, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 to 30, over the course of a day, it could be a whole hour off. So you are always thinking about just even that kind of the flow of that day. But I do it exactly what Cal's doing. So I agree.
And
But
speaking
Jenna,
of timing, I just want to hold.
Sessions always look so fun. You've got an agenda.
I actually do, Cal. And the same thing, you don't have to share, you have a participant agenda. They don't need to know, what's that saying about sausage? You don't need to know all that's in the sausage, it's like.
God knows you don't want to know what's in most sausages.
You probably don't want to know. And the same thing here, may not want to know all those things, but it's important as a facilitator to be thinking about all of those things, though.
And I'll just put a reminder out to our viewing audience. If you have questions, feel free, or comments for that matter, put those in LinkedIn Live. We'll invite our moderator to pop those right into the chat for us so we can field those. But before we do, so put those in when you're ready. I have another question just to build on for Cal and Janet. You know, we've talked about facilitating. It sounds like it's kind of like a solo hero type of sport. It's one person, but I found I almost always co-deliver, often co-deliver. What are some of the things to consider when you're bringing somebody along or you have a co-facilitator? Because it creates a little bit of a different dynamic when you do it with somebody else. Cal, I'll turn to you. Co-facilitation, love it, hate it, things that you consider if you are the more experienced or even the less experienced one for that matter.
Yeah, I love it, actually. And, you know, I think comes down to the two heads are better than one. While I'm speaking, you know, my co-facilitator might be able to really pick up on things that are going on in the room. Whether I'm the less experienced or the most experienced, I think you can certainly learn from each other, and you can bring in someone that you can learn from, or they might be able to learn from you. And it's a great way to almost build in a bit of an apprentice model where I take 70% of the material, but give someone that's newer an opportunity to spread their wings a bit. But I think it's just a great practice to always have a couple facilitators, certainly for groups of 10 or more. And then as you break out into working groups, you've got a little more flexibility as to who works with which group, so that the participants are getting some hands-on coaching and facilitation.
Great point. Janet, you do a tremendous amount. You do both. From what I recall. Tell us a little bit more about when would you do dual, and what are some of the considerations when you're co-delivering?
Yeah, I think size is the primary consideration. If you have 8 to 10 people, I think, you know, that may be what I might consider overkill. And also there's an element that the client, you know, the owner or the clients in my case may not want to bring two extra people in, or, you know, myself and another person. But when there is a larger group, absolutely, you can only have so much, you know, you can only have so many eyes and ears on that team. But also it's a creative process. So that's what's fun about facilitating, co-facilitating. You know, during those breaks, you kind of huddle and you say, okay, you start generating options to try to catch up, because that's what you're usually doing. And or what, you know, what do we think we might need here that we weren't anticipating? So it's always a fun creative experience with another co-facilitator. So not only do you learn, but you also just have that fun of just playing off the ideas of one another with one another.
Vocal variety does matter. I agree 100% on that. We do have a few questions that have been directly sent over to us. So a few questions for you guys. First question was about resources and tools. So some people are interested in, you talked about building kind of plans. Is there any particular tools that you use when you're building an agenda besides Excel? So I'll put that out to either of you, toss up. Any tools, resources you'd recommend?
Well, Dan, I know you and I have used Session Lab as a tool to put agendas together. That's a possibility. I don't know if the tool is as important. You know, Excel is a go-to as well. But I don't know if the tool is as important as just getting that agenda down, getting the boxes filled in around what's the flow and intent and timings. What do you think?
Yeah, I go back to Excel. I keep it pretty simple. I've seen Session Lab, and I think there's, if you're facilitating all the time, you can take, as I understand it, blocks out of Session Lab and copy and paste them, so you can kind of repurpose them and build. But when it comes down to getting things done, I fall back to my good old Excel agenda.
Wow. All right. You guys are traditionalists. I personally love Session Lab. I found it to be an amazing tool. This group of guys, I think they're in Scandinavia. built this tool, and it's really nice. So not, I have no personal equity or stake in it, but I do like that. That's my top tip. We had another question that came in, separate from the agenda. How do you present housekeeping rules and guidelines as you begin this session? Cal, I'll put that out to you. I know there's a lot that you do before you ever get into the content. Housekeeping guidelines, getting people warmed up. What do you do? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there's the basics. Yeah, there's the layout of the room. People want to know where the food or snacks are. They want to know where the bathrooms are. They want to know that there's a break coming at some point. So I'll usually lay out just some of the true housekeeping items pretty early on and pretty conversationally. But I think maybe a little bit more importantly, some of the expectations of how to be for the day or the couple of days.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
A mindset. What
Okay.
what are the behaviors, the mindset? I don't really come out and say, hey, you know what, you can't make fun of someone for a stupid idea or for saying something silly. But I do like to maybe start with some sort of game where participants go through kind of the steps that we'll be going through with their business challenge, but in a playful way. And then, once the game is over, I'll say, you know what, during that game, you thought expansively, you prioritized, you picked a winner. We're going to be doing the same thing with your business challenge. But I noticed during the game, you were laughing, you were being a little silly at times, you were having some fun, you were building that momentum and camaraderie. Those are the exact behaviors we want to see when it comes time to focus on the business challenge. So
Yeah,
kind of mindset, ground rules by doing rather than just telling.
I love I'm a big believer in games. I love that you bring that up because the people don't worry about failing at a game usually. So it's risk-free. It's an experiment. It's fun. And also we know, like, when you're playing a sport or any type of activity, that warm-up matters. It really matters. It makes a big difference. So yeah, I love that. Janet, your thoughts on that, things that you might do beforehand.
Similar in that we always will practice a little divergent thinking, and how do you do that, and deferring your judgment, so that if we're going to ask people to do that in a session on their work related challenge, we want them to do that in a non-work related challenge so they can experience that in a more freeing way. So again, tapping into that. The other thing is I have a couple basic guidelines, such as show up, as we said, show up and choose to be present, listen for understanding. Things such as we're going to diverge, keep divergent thinking separate from convergent thinking. So I might say a few of those, but then at the end, I will ask them. So what else? What else do we agree to as a team that we want to bring in? And that's when they will do the, let's put the phones away, let's put the computers away, all of that, so that it's coming from them versus me telling them, so that there are things that they may choose based on their team to implement as a ground rule. The good thing about that is when somebody breaks the ground rule, you have it up there and you say, well, hey, there it is.
Hey,
you broke it.
Yeah,
and you haven't bought it. You kind of, I can't help but think one of the things that you bring up is this idea about, attending, being present. And it's so damn hard today to be present. I see it, whether it's, with your kids being distracted or us as adults being distracted, doing a workshop. Some people love it because they're forced to be present. Other people find it like a prison. They're like, I don't have my phone. I don't know what to do with myself. And it's difficult. How do you guys cope with that? How do you help folks navigate? Because it's not just cliche. It's fact that there is an addictive nature to technology. We're so accustomed to it. So when you're in a workshop, even if you are using technology, it's to a particular end. They're not surfing Facebook. How do you help people kind of cope with that? I'll throw that out. Either of you can jump on that one.
Well, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Janet,
Can you
Janet,
solve that for me right now?
I don't know if I can solve it, but gone are the days of put your phone in this basket, or you can't break out your phone, because I I use have participants use their phone for real-time voting, or for instance, or use the technology in ways that uh, bring make a multimedia experience out of the session. I, I guess y- with a couple direct statements of, hey, I noticed a couple of you are grabbing your phone. We're going to have a break in 15 minutes. If you don't mind, just put that away for now. Sometimes you do have to just tell them when to break out the phone and when to put it away. But I think most professionals have figured out their own
Yeah.
time management and their own ways of using
Uh-huh.
technology. So it's not a huge problem anymore.
What do you think, Janet?
I would agree. I usually let participants come up with that versus me, because we're all adults in the room. I think the thing about being engaged is more about to engage people is about making sure you're asking questions, open-ended questions, and you are scanning that room to make sure that all those voices are heard. And that's how you get people to be present, because now they're involved in solving this thing or creating this new product or creating a new service, whatever that is that you happen to be working on. So
Mhm.
it's really about the art of the question and making sure that you're including everyone in the development, whether it's the understanding part or the defining or the solution finding, whatever that is, we're all engaged in that activity.
Yeah, great points. And so one more question, and then we are going to go to our speed round, better known as facilitator dilemmas. So hang on to your hats; it's coming. The last question that we got was around a sweet spot or the ideal number of participants in a session. And I know it will really vary based on the type of session, but when somebody says to you, Janet, what's the ideal number for you? How do you respond? Or what questions do you ask to clarify that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends on the scale of the challenge you're working on, but also always remember there's only so much airtime in a meeting. That means the space where people can get to talk and the input. And if you have 30 people in that room, there's going to be less people having that time. So one is, if you have a lot of people, how do you design the session so that there's enough airtime for everybody to have a say?
Right.
And it might be that breaking up into small teams, in which case I might bring a couple facilitators in, so we're in these pods, or that 8 to 10 people, there's usually enough airtime or space for people to give input. So I often will think that together, an 8 to 10, maybe even 12 people, you probably have enough space. But otherwise, once you get there, that doesn't mean you have to exclude people. You just have to change your design. And
Right.
designing is a critical element in facilitating. It's not, you're going to plan it. Yes, then you have to design the session. And that's all about how do we make sure that we have enough space for people to be heard.
Yeah, that's a great point. You may have to change your design if the number doubles because you can't give them the same love and same engagement. Cal, is there too small? Is there ever too small of a workshop?
Well, it depends on what you define as the workshop. Like, I might scope out the workshop with the sponsor and maybe one other. So that's me and two stakeholders. Yeah, that's a mini workshop in a way, just to make sure we're aligned. Um, I wouldn't really want to go in and do a workshop with two participants, because they're just going to diverge, you know, 1 times 1. It's you're not going to have a lot of uh, different perspectives. 5 or 6, I think that's very workable.
Okay.
It's enough to kind of be expansive, get some expansive thinking, but still get something done. So I wouldn't worry as much about it being too small, as long as you've got 5 or 6 people.
Would
Better.
you And let me just kind of build on it a little bit more. Is there a sweet spot for you? Is there like a number? Like if somebody said to you, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to be facilitating, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do. What's the ideal number for you? Like if you're going to pull some numerology out the other end, what number would you pull out?
Here is the number,
All right, I'm ready.
6 or 7.
Wow. All right.
As a
That's
breakout
small.
group. I don't really
Okay.
care as much about how many people are in it. What I care about is, are the people that are there for a reason? Do they have something to contribute, some real reason for being there? I don't want just hangers on. But I can share what I have to share to any number of people. But then what I want them to do is break into groups, really no more than 7. 6 or 7 is really just perfect. And as Janet said, at that point, I love to have um, a co-facilitator, or if I'm not able to have a facilitator for each table, what I like to do is beforehand go around and just find someone at each table that I can appoint as a table captain
Uh-huh.
or ambassador, or give them some title where I can look to them to know that that table has completed their task, or they're ready to move on, whatever the case may be, just so you can get a little bit of a read of the room a little more quickly.
And I'd be remiss if I don't ask one more question before we go to our speed round. Somebody asked this in LinkedIn Live, and it's a great question. It's probably on everybody's mind: is virtual versus in person. We live in both of these worlds. All of us do. We know that. How does that? There are a lot of people that will tell me, Dan, I can't do this type of workshop virtual, and I find that you can do something much better virtual. Personally, what do you guys find? What are some of the considerations about designing for virtual that perhaps you wouldn't think about as kind of like a hobbyist as a facilitator? What do you consider, Janet?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. Certainly super relevant in today's world.
Yeah.
And the last few years, I think we have learned we can do a lot more virtually than we thought we could. So that gave us that permission to experiment and try new things. I think that the skills are steady, they're stable. You still want to do divergent thinking before convergent thinking, defer your judgment, have a process to navigate through the complexity. So we don't have people going all over the place at the same time. We're not thinking the exact same thoughts, but we're thinking in the same space at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Though, we've added a few elements that help you. So you have tools that are out there to use virtually. If I'm doing a team, if I'm working with a team virtually, I don't want to just have a Zoom call. We might have a board where we're actually able to collaborate, such as Miro or Mural. There's a lot of different virtual tools out there to use, and in terms of converging, there's Pull Everywhere. There's a lot of different things to employ there. So do that, and always better to have those things than not have them, and just have this conversation that swirls around. So that's my take.
That's a great point. So, Cal, I'm going to ask you the same or similar-ish thing about the virtual experience. I do remember, it's got to be at least a few years, you said to me, hey, you got to try out Miro. And I said, I don't know. Like, I've used some other virtual stuff. And then I fell in love with it. Because you can do so much with it. You can do things differently. The recording, the capturing is much richer than when you're in person. However, you have the consideration that people are not fully present. They may be doing something else. How do you get people engaged? What do you do in the virtual world? Because some people definitely are struggling with this.
Yeah, and I use Miro. I love it, but I don't think it should be the center of attention. Just like in a live workshop, it's not the workshop was okay, but I love the flip chart. Miro's just the flip chart. So sometimes I will have a little bit of a game within Miro, where, okay, everyone, let's grab a Post-it note and put your favorite snack or something, where they have to actively do something, put their name and what they'd have for a snack at the break that's coming up, just to make sure that everyone is present and accounted for and engaged. because, when you start seeing all the little names floating around, you can't tell if one person has checked out and really isn't participating. So I might do something like that, but again, the important thing is they're using the tool for the purpose at hand, not just because it's a cool tool. When it comes down to the overarching question of live versus virtual, I would say though, either or. It's tough when some are live and some are virtual, and that's where it gets difficult. But I think we can do just about everything with the virtual tools, the Zoom and Teams breakouts plus Miro. That's a pretty good combination.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the questions, folks. If you have other points, comments, questions, keep them coming on LinkedIn Live. We only have a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to get to facilitator dilemmas. So, Cal, Janet, here are the rules of the game. I'm going to read off a scenario. I'm going to appoint one of you as the respondent. If someone else wants to jump in, you're welcome to do it, to add on to this. These are all scenarios that we've faced before. So if you listening in are thinking, boy, I didn't hear about this, well, there's a good chance you'll get a scenario that you might have come across before, or that you will. So we'll do that. You got 30 seconds. And I've got my handy dandy bell here to ring away to tell you time is up. You guys ready?
I'm getting nervous.
Me too. All right. I know the pressure is on. Cal, I'm going to start with you first since you're nervous. Your project sponsor tells you you're conducting an in-person session, but when you get there, there are 4 people dialed in and just a handful of people in the room. What do? You're on the clock.
That's what we were just talking about. In a case like that, I think I would pivot quickly and have the 4 people that are dialed in do a breakout on their own and set up a Miro board very quickly for them, and then have the group that's in person be another breakout group, bring them together for the main topic, but let them go into the breakouts. Now, I have done times where I've given a live person a buddy to have one of the remote people on a phone, but I think in this case, I'd separate them out entirely.
Awesome. Right on the dot. Janet, anything to add to that or anything different?
I think that was a nice pivot. It's a great way of quickly figuring that one out. Good job, Cal.
All right. Well, Janet, you're on the clock now. You ready? There's one participant in your workshop, and they cannot stop criticizing every single contribution and idea, both verbally and non-verbally, rolling their eyes, and you don't know what to do with this person. What do you do when there's that one jerk that just doesn't stop, crapping over everybody's contributions?
Yeah. So there's a few things that I might do here, and it's a subtle escalation. So in the beginning, if I am capturing what they're saying, I would just preface that Dan thinks XYZ, whatever you think. And if they continue, I would keep pointing. Did I get that? Did I miss anything, Dan? Is there more to that, to your criticism? So I might just capture it verbatim. So I'm not judging. It's just he thinks. I'll capture it. If they are converging while somebody else is diverging, let's just say it's an idea and they come up with an idea and Dan says that's such a stupid idea, I might then pause and just put it out there. We are diverging. What are you doing? Let me ask, are you diverging or converging? And they often will recognize they're converging, and I'll say, great. Well, so let's turn your criticism into another idea. Give me another idea. So that's a technique.
All right,
and if
I love it.
continues through the day, I don't know how much time I have, but I would just simply
Hold on.
debrief, and I would just put that person aside and just do a little debrief with them.
I like that. Sorry, I gave you the ring on the bell. Cal, anything else you would do? Anything you've done?
No, I think Janet hit it.
Yeah.
I like the escalation idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just pull out, since we just had the World Cup, congratulations to Lionel Messi also, who's considered the great facilitator on the soccer field. Sometimes you could borrow a little bit of World Cup soccer and pull out the yellow card and say, hey, I'm going to have to, this is a bookable offense. I'm going to have to send you, off the field if you do it again. Although it might be a little kitschy, some little signal like that can make a difference. All right, Cal, You're running a workshop and the goal is to generate big disruptive ideas, but the ideas so far are not particularly big or disruptive or even that great. What do you do?
Yeah, I think at that point I would pivot. I wouldn't make any sort of announcement. I would say, you know what, great, we've got a good collection of ideas, but now let's see if we can really push them. And I would throw out some provocations, and sometimes I even carry little cards that have set provocations, and there's different techniques like Scamper, but I would say, how would you solve for this challenge if you had a superpower? How would you solve for this challenge if you were 5 years old? How would you solve for this challenge, if it had to be done with zero budget? And let them take another stab at it. And sometimes just with that self-imposed roadblock, you get teams that think about it completely differently. Like, oh, if I had zero budget, I'd have to do this, and I would, or conversely, unlimited budget. Oh, if money wasn't a worry, I would do this and that. And that gets those ideas to go beyond just the incremental. And usually teams don't go so wild that there isn't a kernel of reality in there that can be built on, that's a little bit further out there than the initial ideas.
I like it.
Great.
Great point. I love pushing the thinking and trying to break the existing patterns they're stuck in. So good suggestion there, Cal. Janet, pre-work. Everybody hates doing it, but we know the battle is won or lost before you step on the battlefield. Here's a situation. There are a couple exercises in your workshop that depend on the pre-work being done, and everybody's agreed to doing it. You show up to the workshop, nobody did the pre-work. What do you do?
Yeah, that is so common. It's more common than not common. So I'll be honest with you, Dan, I always assume that there will be people that haven't done the pre-work. You just have to embed that, and that if they don't do it, then you're hoping that they'll catch up. But there's not a whole lot that I do in terms of, I try to minimize the pre-work actually, because of that people are busy, they're very busy people, and you're just going to assume that they aren't going to have that much time. Or if they do, that there's a way to make sure that they've done it. In other words, if you want them to read something, you might ask them to send their response in before the workshop. That way you can be assured that they've at least put their eyes on it. And if they haven't, then send them a little note reminding them to do it. But I just try to minimize the pre-work because of that happening often.
And it does remind me that as a facilitator, you're one part facilitator, one part designer, one part behavioral scientist. You're trying to modify people's behaviors. So that's a great point about using the kind of response in front, right in the beginning, to create that behavior, to encourage that behavior. Speaking of which, Cal, imagine you're facilitating a virtual workshop. Participants aren't responding at all. What do you do?
Log off, try again another day. Now, if they're just not responding at all, you have to bring it up. It's like, we've got an objective here. We've got a limited amount of time, and the sponsor's really expecting X, Y, or Z. It's been quiet. Maybe we need a little fresh air. So let's take a quick break, grab some highly caffeinated beverage, or run outside. But when we come back, we're going to have even less time to get the work done. So let's expect this, that, and the other. When we come back, it's going to be super fast, but we're going to get it done, and we'll get out. So, I mean, give them the chance to change their environment, and tell them when they come back, they're really under a time constraint to deliver for really what they're there to deliver. It's not, I don't own it.
Speaking of which, Janet, if you had to come to a workshop and you've been told you had 6 hours to do it, but you know what, we got to cut it down to 4, and you've been told that right on the spot, which I'm sure has never happened to you before. What do you do? What do you do when you, like, a third of your agenda time has just been completely eviscerated?
That's a very realistic situation. And as I think that actually happened to me very recently. I was working in Morocco, and this workshop was designed months before, right? I mean, not on the spot. So here we are, and of course, Morocco is in the World Cup, playing Spain in the quarterfinals, and that's a big deal. And
That
so
was a big deal.
it's a big deal.
Very big deal.
The participants came and basically said, oh no, we need to be where we're going to be to watch the game, and we need to be out of here at 2:30. So that agenda, a couple hours just got taken off that agenda. And so yes, we had to rethink. And so always the first thing you think about is, what's the intent? What were the objectives of that day? There were some things that they were nice to have, but there were things we must have. And so that's what we focused on. It's like, let's, we had a few nice to haves in some spots that we peppered through, and we stopped all the peppering through and we pushed all the must haves right up front. And so, and we all agreed that there may be some stuff we have to catch up with. Do we all agree? Yes. Okay. But yeah, that happens all the time. And you just have to be agile in that moment. You have to think about, how might we do this? How might we do this in a new way? How might we do this in maybe a faster way, or how might we get the most important things done? And,
a working lunch.
And working lunch, no break in the afternoon. And those were some things we actually did. We said, okay, well, if you're leaving at 2:30, we take that break away. You okay with that? Oh yeah. And and we shortened, we did a little shortening of lunch, but sometimes that doesn't work either. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, World Cup, hard to plan for. There was big happening there. That was a great real example. We are just about out of time. I have one more. I'll throw it as a toss up to you guys, and then kind of some closing thoughts from both of you. Toss up question. You arrive at a workshop and the place looks like someone decorated it like it was Rikers Island. It's small, dark, dingy. There's a big table right in the center. It's awful. How do you run as a facilitator? What do you do, and how do you kind of improvise given the circumstances and the setting isn't what you were promised or expected?
Well, I'll just start on that, Cal, because it just happened not that long ago. And first of all, you never just show up at a workshop. Let me just preface that. You should always be at that workshop and enough time to rearrange everything. And we have to, when you completely can flip around the environment, to Cal's point before, your environment is important. How are chairs arranged? Is there a big table in the middle? Get that out of there. If you could possibly do that, those open that space up as much as possible. And there was a meeting recently. It was actually in another country, but it was so dark in that room. So what did we do? We scoured the space. We brought lamps in from outside of that room. We're like taking them out of the lobby, grabbing them.
I love it. It's like a flea market. It's a Moroccan shuk where you can just grab
it was in Egypt,
Appleton carpets and bring them in.
We were just grabbing stuff and to brighten up that space, because lighting is everything. And so
I hate to
show up or never show up on time. Always show up plenty early.
That is a great point. Timing. Things will never be the way you expect them to be. So always be ready to improvise and be early.
Photos of the space. Always ask for photos of the space to be sent to you ahead of time.
Great points. All right. Well, we are just about out of time, but I'm going to ask Cal first from you. Any sort of hidden secrets, little gems to share with the group, your parting advice that maybe we haven't shared yet?
Well, I already gave you the secret that you should plan, you should have a detailed agenda, you should know what you need to accomplish, how you're going to do it. But once you get into it, I think key is to have some fun. I mean, you're going to have one of the best roles in the company, or in the facilitator has the best role with the group they're working with. Have some fun with it. Be ready to flex. Don't get freaked out as things change, because they change every single time. Just make sure you follow through on those objectives that you want to accomplish, and have some fun with it, and things will go just fine. They always seem to.
Awesome. Thanks, Cal. Janet, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, so always remember that you aren't a content expert in what they're doing. So your role is to get people to think well together. That's what you're there for. You don't need to know about what they're working on as much as how they're working on it. So stay on that side. Get them to think well together and trust that they have the content.
I love it. Great. From your lips, right to everyone else's ears. Well said. First of all, big high five for you guys. You are both amazing. Thank you so much for sharing some of these secrets, or not so secrets that everybody knows, but they don't think about. You guys were great. For our folks, next episode will be in 2023, if you could believe it. 2023 is almost upon us. But from Deliberate Innovation for the Deliberate Way, we'd like to thank you guys, our friends, our clients, our colleagues. We hope you have a very safe, healthy, and prosperous new year. And in 2023, be on the lookout. We're going to have some awesome episodes coming your way while we deconstruct the deliberate ways people do different things. Again, Janet, Cal, thank you for being with us today. And for everyone else, be well. We'll talk to you soon. Stay deliberate.